So I'd like to call the Thursday, June 13th school committee meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd like to recognize Westwood Media Center, which is live streaming the meeting and also recording it for later viewing on its platforms. And I'd also like to take this opportunity just to thank Westwood Media Center for being such phenomenal partners this year, broadcasting all of our meetings and all of the extracurricular events within the schools and the launch of the Pine Hill School. We really appreciate their partnership. And I'll hand it over to you, Tim.
Sure, thank you. Just before we get into some of the things that are on the agenda formally, I just want to provide, we've reached that point where at the end of the year there's a lot of celebrations, there's a lot of activities, and pictures always tell 1,000 words, so I want to take the opportunity to show a few. I have to give credit to Amy Davenport, who took this picture from up at the podium during graduation. I think it's a great shot looking out just at the moment the ceremony ended. So it's great to be through my first graduation here in Westwood. We also have our moving up ceremonies going on. This is from the Martha Jones moving up ceremony as students are going from 5th grade off to Thurston next year. I know Thurston's ceremony is tomorrow, so we're excited about these. J-term is underway at the high school. That started earlier this week. And so you can see all the, I couldn't tell you what all of these activities are necessarily, but you get a sense of really the experiential hand-on work that, that students are doing during J-term at the high school. And we held our milestone ceremony earlier this week where we recognized educators for 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 years of service. Not everybody was able to make it, so this is not an exhaustive list, but as I said at the ceremony, we recognized 61 employees for a milestone year for a cumulative 980 years of service to the students of Westwood. So our 10, our 15, our 20, our 25, and then Mary Mundy over at Martha Jones was our 30-year recipient this year. And then we have been doing our Pride Month celebrations throughout the course. This is from over at Sheehan, and so I just wanted to share as well. So today we also welcome some new members to our administrative team. So 2 of these I've put out publicly previously. The third one is brand new, and I'll talk about the third one in a second, but numbers 1 and 2 are here today. So if I can ask Chantel to come up, please. So Chantel Washington is our new Director of Human Resources, our inaugural Director of Human Resources. Chantel joins us from the Belmont Public Schools, and so happy to have you on board.
I'm happy to be here, thank you. I'm excited. I've been here earlier today working with Allison, and she's been so kind and generous with her time and resources, so I'm excited to get started.
So welcome, Chantel. We're thrilled to have you here and looking forward to the work ahead with you. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Chantel.
And then also Reid Jones. Reid, if you want to join us. So this announcement came out a few weeks ago to the point where Reid has actually been involved intricately in the third hire on this list. So Reid Jones is our new principal at Pine Hill. I think this happened right after our May meeting. Reid, we're so happy to have you on board. Reid joins us from the Mason School in Boston, where he's finishing up the year there. I know that you've been involved as the co-chair of the Pine Hill Assistant Principal Search. And you've been doing transition days. I know we missed each other at the Community Art Night a couple of weeks ago, but very happy to have you here as well.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, School Committee. It's been a really exciting process so far. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be joining Westwood and the Pine Hill community, and I'm really excited about the work ahead. So just thank you again, and I look forward to working with you all.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Reid. And then the final announcement, and we just put this out earlier today. So Samantha Bean has been appointed, and again, I thank Reid and Donna Tobin, who are the co-chairs of our assistant principal search team for Pine Hill, as well as the other members of the search team. So Samantha Bean joins us. She is currently one of the assistant principals at the Parlin School in Everett, which is a much larger school. It's a 1,000-student K-8 school, where she is one of the assistant principals there. Prior to that, she was a special education teacher in Chelsea, and so to be able to bring her expertise both with a large community and with a special ed background to provide a great complement to Reid and to the Pine Hill staff. Samantha was unfortunately not able to be here tonight. I just offered her the job yesterday, so her ability to sort of be here on short notice was unfortunately not able to happen, but I know that we'll do a more formal introduction to the committee, I think, in the fall. So with that, I'm very happy to announce those 3 hires. So.
Congrats.
Thank you. Just some other things from the superintendent's report to talk about our visioning facility study update. We talked about this extensively at our last meeting. We have done the initial visioning session that was done with all grade spans. We then did 2 additional meetings for each of our elementary, middle, and high school grade spans. One of the things that was a little challenging is, and I talked about this before, we were late in the year. It was tough to get the level of participation, given the fact that we were doing this in late May and early June. And when we look at doing our phase 2 work in the fall, we're going to look at multiple opportunities, multiple touch points, multiple formats, multiple times to be able to get more people involved in the conversation. The physical part of the tours, tours of buildings were conducted with principals over the last couple of weeks to identify the educational use and need, because again, what we do with facilities are only as good as the kind of education we can deliver inside of them. But then the facilities tour with our facility staff, getting behind the walls, looking at the boilers, all those kinds of things, that starts next week and will happen over the next couple of weeks. Our phase 2 visioning work, which is the portrait of graduate, will begin in the fall. And in our conversation with Doran Whittier, I think it makes sense to do a presentation of the initial, very high-level findings in September. I'd ask for some guidance from the committee, and we can discuss this during our retreat, or if there's some feedback tonight, about whether or not we want to do that as part of a school committee meeting or as a standalone meeting specifically dedicated to facilities. I think my inclination is probably the latter, just so it's a targeted conversation as opposed to as part of a full school committee agenda, but we can talk about that more going forward. I just want to briefly address the cell phone task force. So I want to thank the members of the community who expressed great interest in that task force. I think we had 107 applications to the cell phone task force. Certainly we could not take everybody because that would not have been a manageable group to be able to move forward. But I know we've got roughly about 18 or so. The notifications went out last week. We're going to be scheduling our first meeting, which I probably ironically will be virtually. I think we just don't acknowledge given where we are in the year, but that's just sort of for everybody to get a chance to know who everybody is and then really begin our work in the fall on that. I talked about the Pine Hill Assistant Principal Search update previously. And the last thing formally under Superintendent's report tonight, these are some of the pictures from the visioning work. I should have put these up previously. This was our initial kickoff meeting. I think you can see our committee's own Dory in the back here. And then this was one of the high school specific sessions. I appreciated the fact that we had a ton of students from the high school as part of those visiting sessions that we did. And just to actually talk about one of the exercises, so you can see on the table a whole bunch of paper. Those were different examples of designs to address educational problems. And people went around and put little stickies on what they liked, what they thought was great, what they thought, I'm intrigued but don't know how it would work here, and what they thought was, no, don't do that. There were not a whole lot of red stickies on these things, but it was really great to kind of go through that experience. The last thing I want to formally talk about is extended day. Just to provide an update, I know we had talked about our approach to extended day and how we had revamped the system back in our January or February meeting. So we opened registration for extended day on May 17th. And close the initial lottery at 5 p.m. on May 24th. And we do hope to be able to conduct that lottery earlier in the spring and future years. Obviously, this is a new system we're implementing this year. We know that families need to have some knowledge so they can plan, so we want to be able to move the timeline back earlier in the year and future years. Just before I get into this, I sort of want to remind the challenge we have here, and you'll see the numbers a little bit later, is that we have far more demand in the community than we have ability to supply an extended day. In some buildings, there is a limitation of space. In all buildings, there is a limitation of staffing. And the ability to have staffing, to be able to plan for staffing, has caused a crunch point, right? And so the system we designed this year was designed to basically lay out our parameters more transparently. We're doing this update to talk about where we stand right now and to try to create at least a more fair and equitable process for being able to do this. So we conducted lotteries on the afternoon of May 24th. I did that personally for lotteries for each site. We did a separate lottery for returning families and new families for each site. Just to address at least one misconception I had heard, there was one lottery run for the entire program, not a separate lottery for each day of the week. One of our guiding principles is that we wanted continuity for students, so to split and piecemeal by days of the week was not consistent with that design goal. And then when I ran the lottery, I actually recorded it, blacked out student information so there was no bias. If anybody's curious and wants to see it, you're welcome to contact me. You can come to my office and watch me talking over a video for 10 minutes. But we did that just to make sure that we maintained integrity of the lottery process. In terms of how we allocated, previously we had only prioritized returning families. We talked about wanting to make sure that there were some slots available for new families as part of extended day. So in grades 1 through 5, 80% of slots were allocated to returning families, 20% for new families. And in kindergarten, because obviously kindergarten is the place where students are new to the district, but we did the lottery by family, not by individual student. The split was 50-50 in grade K. Any applications received after that deadline of May 24th have been added to the end of the wait list on a first-come, first-served basis. District-wide, and these numbers are at least to some degree proportional by the size of the school, we received a total of 469 applications for after-school care and 178 for before-school care. And you can see that our enrollment, we were able to enroll 253 in after-school, 125 in before-school. The wait list numbers are actually slightly bigger than the difference between those two because some families were partially waitlisted. Because basically if you were number 1 on the lottery list and you requested Monday through Friday, you would get all those days. If you were number 2 and you only requested Tuesday, Wednesday, you would fill Tuesday, Wednesday. And so where some families later on in the list may have gotten some of what the request is, but not all of the days. So they're both partial and full wait lists. Consistent with our standard, what we talked about previously, we're enrolling at 75% of current enrollment right now, and as staffing is solidified later in the summer, we anticipate that additional slots will open in mid to late August. In terms of how families come off of the wait list, we are maintaining separate wait lists for returning families and new families. If a slot opens, it will be replaced by somebody on the wait list of the same type. So if a returning child comes out of the program, it would be replaced by a returning family on the returning wait list. If a new child comes out, it would be replaced by a new family on the new family wait list. And the wait list structure is based upon the programmatic model. So in the after school, it is grade specific, so we maintain a separate wait list for K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For before school, because the program is consolidated, is one consolidated wait list for before school care. And one thing, if there's any confusion about this, although there is only one lottery number for each family, the placement on the wait list may be different for different days of the week because of how the slots were filled previously, or because, for example, we have fewer slots on Friday. It's much more difficult for us to maintain staffing on Fridays. So that's one of the things where, and our wait list is actually smaller on Fridays as well too. But that's where the placement on the wait list may be different. So with that being said, I'm happy to entertain any questions from the committee about this. And I figure this is a place where it's probably a good place to pause. So.
Go ahead.
I just really wanted to make a point, and I do have a question. My first point is that, I've heard some previous chatter and recent chatter around staffing. And I think it's important to distinguish that it's not a matter of just hiring every high school student, because we need to have a responsible adult on site, right, who is, I could think, above the age of 18, right, to meet certain criteria to be a child care facility.
Yeah, that's an accurate statement.
So I think a lot of people are like, just hire the high school students, and it's not like the same thing as hiring a babysitter, because it's more of a business, right? So that's one thing, and I think you have to really take a step back and realize that this is a very part-time job, and not a lot of adults really only want to work 3 hours a day, right? So it is difficult to find staff, and it's not unique to Westwood. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think a lot of people hear staffing and they think, oh, it's just really easy to go out and hire folks, but it's a very unique job. It's a very important job, and we want to make sure we're getting it right. My question is around the timing of how the enrollments were distributed day over day.
That was mine.
And if you could talk to kind of the rhyme or reason around that. I've gotten a little feedback around that.
Yeah, no, I think I've heard that as well too, and I think that's a fair critique, right, is that they were sort of rolled out as soon as they were completed for a school. Given the process that we go through, they're not able to be completed simultaneously for all the schools simultaneously. And so I think the intention of that was basically to notify families as soon as possible. But that being said, that also leads to some, I don't want to use the word chaos, but I'll use the word chaos because a better word doesn't come to mind. Where I think Downey was probably notified first, where families at Downey are knowing about their status before families at Sheehan or Pine Hill are, right? And so I think particularly if we are able to move the timeline earlier in the year, then we can hold those notifications until they're all complete and ready to go.
Yeah, okay, I think that would be best case scenario. Yep.
That was my comment. I heard the same feedback, and I would just recommend holding until everyone hears it once.
The other question that I had is I noticed, I think the registration was done over Google Doc this year. Have we thought about implementing some sort of a system for registration? I know there's ProCare in place for managing, paying your bill and uploading emergency contact information, but I don't know about a registration system that would be.
I think we've contemplated, so we originally, when we signed on to ProCare, we hoped that it could be effective for registration.
Yep.
And we found that just the software doesn't lend itself to that and doesn't allow us to really enable it. I think it will create more of a burden for families and for our staff.
Yeah.
So it was difficult on both ends, and we decided to use that Google form as an alternative because of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of technology out there. I feel like there could be a system that, maybe it's not ProCare, that could help the registration process from end to end. Maybe it even does a lottery so that you don't have to videotape yourself.
No, honestly, the lottery took 10 minutes. It wasn't
Yeah,
overly,
yeah.
Google has a randomized row feature that essentially acts like a lottery. But so on my side, it was not a technical challenge, but obviously we want it to be a positive experience from the end user perspective.
Of course.
So.
Did you,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, did you get feedback on the registration process? Or?
Yeah, no, I've certainly heard some, right? One of the pieces of concern that I've heard, and this is related to sort of the lottery being one consistent lottery as opposed to a separate lottery for each day. I know in previous years, what was done was to try to give as many families as possible a little bit of care. And that was one of the pieces of feedback I heard in my entry plan, and we talked about earlier in the fall, is that the result of giving more families a little bit also resulted in more families not getting what they needed and trying to procure independent childcare from elsewhere. And so that was a conscious decision to the way that we structured this to do the lottery in that regard. So that was one concern that I heard. I think there are just other concerns about basically there are supply and demand issues. I think that is the biggest thing. But certainly if people have feedback about the process, our goal is to improve with each subsequent year. What I would say is, while I know people are reaching out to Michael Fagoni, who is doing incredible work to maintain and manage this whole process, but if you have questions from a structural standpoint, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Email addresses on the website. Happen to meet with parents individually or families individually if they would like to, because the structural things rest with my office and not with Michael.
Yeah. I'm just curious because I know people last year were very frustrated, and I think there were a lot of steps implemented to improve the process, so I just want to know if it was a better experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we've done a customer survey feedback at this point in time, right? And I think that, ultimately, again, I think the timing of the year, it's tougher for it to be later in the year, right? And we acknowledge that. It's a step we're going to make. I think the piece that you and Dory have already talked about sort of piecemealing the release, that's something we've already identified that we can address and make better next year. I think ultimately the challenge is still going to be, we have way more demand than we have supply.
Yeah.
And there's only so many ways to be able to piece that up in a way, and so this is an effort to try to address some of the major concerns that we heard. But if there are ideas, I can't promise we're going to be able to implement them, but I'm certainly willing to listen to those.
I think one improvement that is glaring is that it wasn't like this rush to get on and register. I think that was feedback that we heard last year, that it wasn't equitable if somebody couldn't sign on at noontime on a weekday. So I think that improvement is great, that it was a more kind of open time frame.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. These came from residents, not me. So I'll just ask both of them and you can address them just for everyone hears it. So the first question was around if you're a walker in a walker district and you pay the bus fee, assuming there's space, there's a private option can they give bus to the private option? And that second question was around just the process for Boston students. That was the question.
Yeah, so on the first part, and we can also, it's not written into the transportation policy, and we'll talk about that later on in the agenda. The short version of that, I am grateful that there is at least another after-school opportunity that is open in the community, and we are certainly willing to partner with them so that if a student or a family pays the transportation fee, even if they are walker zone, we would be able to maintain transportation for them in the afternoon. There's not necessarily space in the morning. We wouldn't pick them up in a walker zone, but we could make sure that there's space available. We need to work out some technical aspects from the registration because I think right now if they enter their address, they get kicked out.
I think they'll have to use the paper-based walker form, which is what our families have to use anyway.
Okay.
I did clarify some of this, but I apologize if the families that were inquiring about the Walker opportunity didn't get immediate answers on that, but we have since then developed like a plan for how
Who
to
should they reach out to?
allow that. So they can email bus registration at Westwood Public Schools. That address is also on our quick links in the bus registration page.
Okay.
And they can follow the Walker form, the Walker request process. And we would guarantee a space in the afternoon, because people really need to know, in order to register, will they have a ride? So we can guarantee a space in the afternoon. The space in the morning is the thing that is still to be determined, and will be on a case-by-case basis after we route the buses. We don't think we'll have capacity constraints in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I will say, right, I mean, we're able to do this based upon the geography of where this program exists, right? If, because it is right next to where our buses return at the end of the day, right? So we're not rerouting to a different part of town. We're able to kind of do that within the existing routes by just adding a stop. If something were to open up somewhere else in the community, I can't necessarily guarantee that we'd be able to do the same thing. To your second question about the process for Boston students, so as part of the METCO grant, our students from Boston, it is important that they're integrated with the Westwood community, not just during the academic part of the day, but they have other opportunities to engage in play and other things as part of our full experience here as students in Westwood. So as part of that grant, on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays until the bus leaves, there's a period of time where there are slots, but it is staffed by staff associated with the METCO grant. We have redone the registration process this year so that those slots are not impacting the slots that are available to non-Boston students. And if a family from Boston is looking for care beyond what is there and allocated as part of the METCO grant, then they would also have gone into the lottery as would any other family, right? So we wanted to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the program and the purpose of the program, but in a way that didn't impact the larger population disproportionately, right?
Thank you.
Any other questions about extended day?
I just thank you for the care. This is complex and there's a lot of variables, and I can see that a lot of thought and care went into trying to create a more equitable, easy to use, manageable process for our families that actually results in care that they need when they need it. So thank you for taking the time to really think about that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I wish we could satisfy the needs of all of our, I think we all wish we could satisfy the needs of all of our families, but we are constrained by what we are constrained by. And then just the last thing on our superintendent's report, with the chair's permission, I'm actually going to defer my last comments until the end of the meeting. I opened up this by welcoming some new members. I know we're going to be saying goodbye to some folks, so if we can, no really good way to transition after that. So if I can defer to the end with your permission,
Fair
I
enough,
appreciate that.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we will open up the floor for public participation. If there are any members of the public that would like to address the committee, feel free to come down, share your name and your street address. And you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Greg Kelly, 79 High Rock Lane. I'd just like to make some comments and as a follow-up, I guess, to what we just heard about the extended day program. So first I want to say I appreciate you all having this forum and your willingness to hear directly from the community. I think, thinking back to last year, you all correctly identified capacity and registration as issues that families have faced with the extended day program. I'm grateful that you've stuck with it as it continues to affect, as you can see, a growing number of elementary school parents at this point. And so, again, grateful that you made an effort to address the registration. But in my experience, having just got our wait list notification, it doesn't feel any better or worse as opposed to the letter that I got last year about being placed on the wait list for extended day. And the process has only served to randomize who feels the pain as opposed to prioritizing who can be there at 6 in the morning to sign online. So I'd encourage you all to please consider exploring new ways to expand capacity. I know that is the issue. Please think about new and novel ways to expand capacity. We have an empty Deerfield school right now. It seems like there's more school space perhaps than there was previously, because extended day is a critical resource for working families in town. Maybe as a last thought, that solving the capacity issue renders the registration issue moot. It solves it, out of hand. So, thanks for putting the numbers up there in terms of the registration. I think previously we saw sort of what a percentage of the entire school district was in terms of demand for it, but I think you all need to really consider it as a percentage of the elementary school families, and particularly, K through 3, who really don't have kids who can get themselves off the bus in the afternoon. Frankly, is compounded by the fact that we have to be there to put them on the bus at, 10 of 9 in the morning. It's a really difficult schedule to have to accommodate as a working family. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to share comments?
Kind of did this real time, so.
Can you just share your name and your address?
Yeah, it's Michael Comer at 19 Longmeadow Drive in Westwood. So I guess I did do a little bit of a real-time customer survey. I hate to say it wasn't very good. In fact, it was probably entirely negative, but that might just be who we sampled. I know, Tim, you said that the purpose was to shift away from everyone or more people getting a little bit. It sounded like everybody got a little bit, at least everyone that we talked to, 10, 20 families, and nobody got what they needed. So I appreciate the effort. I don't think the results are what we wanted, but maybe the data may be different when it comes out, so please share it when it does. Obviously, we do have a demand-supply issue. We luckily have a real-time sample on what to go by. We have another program that's double the price for all intents and purposes and has no problem filling. So, is that just basic economics? Do we need to increase the price? I'm sure people are willing to pay in order to pay staff more, in order to, hire more, and that's our solution. Sounds like space isn't necessarily an issue if the Boston students aren't impacting, at least at Pine Hill. If they're not impacting, then it can't be a space issue. It must be a personnel issue. So usually you can solve that with higher salaries, I would imagine. And then Greg brought up a great point. The start time, and this may be irrelevant, but at least for elementary, starting at 9 a.m., the kids that need the parents home in the morning the most start the latest. So, I know a whole lot of jobs that you can get to the office at 10 o'clock and have a job for very long. So, I know that was adjusted last year, but if we can't, get the coverage for whatever reason in the morning or the afternoon, maybe we could at least change what we can change and have the times be, appropriate for the people that need it. But really appreciate the effort. I know it was in good faith. I'm hoping that the data does come out and prove that it worked. So far, I don't think it has, but that's just my random sample. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else have comments? All right. So moving along to school committee updates. I don't have a lot in terms of an update. I just wanted to alert everybody that we have our summer retreat on July 11th. That's an opportunity for the committee to come together to talk about strategy and planning for the next year. So I am looking forward to that. And then I'll hand it over if anybody else has reports.
I have an update. Since our last meeting, Dory and I had a capital subcommittee meeting. And the topic of that meeting was the solar canopy project in the high school lot. So I just wanted to give everyone an update on what's going on there. I think it might be helpful for everyone here just to kind of refresh going back to the beginning. So this came in front of us for the first time on June 9th, 2022. Tom Philbin, the town energy manager, gave us a presentation about putting solar canopies in the parking lot. And I think this was something that had been brought to the school committees, not formally maybe, but, anyway, he brought it forward to us, and I think at that meeting we expressed interest in I think we were all interested in the project, but we had a fair number of questions. Mm-hmm. So in September 2022 meeting, Amoresco came, and Amoresco, just to remind everyone, had been the winning vendor of an RFQ that went out in 2016 for solar issues, and they had already implemented solar projects on the roofs of municipal buildings, and that was considered phase 1. So they were coming to us and presented to us about what they were calling phase 2. And phase 2 consisted of 2 things. 1, the solar parking canopies at the high school, and 2, solar parking canopies at the Council on Aging. So at that meeting, Amoresco showed us a plan, and I should have thought ahead to put it up here, but basically showing 3 rows of canopies limited to the student parking lot, one after the other, right? 1, 2, 3. So in the third one, there would be a little bit of an overhang over the multipurpose field. So if you can picture that, and apologies for not getting the plan up. So they showed us that plan. They acknowledged that the original plan they had presented had solar canopies in the faculty parking lot, but I think there was feedback from the town before we were involved that resulted in this shift, so it was just going to be in the student parking lot. And at that time, they also provided what they were calling a conservative construction schedule that had construction commencing in June 2024, so this summer, with the commercial operation beginning in August of 2024. We had discussed, could we possibly do that starting in the summer of 2023. Everyone was really going to push for 2023, but wanted to present us with the most conservative schedule possible. So that was the September 2022 meeting. From that point on, Lemma worked extremely diligently with Amoresco and with Tom and with the town to push this project forward. I believe they obtained the interconnection agreement with Eversource. There was a PPA that was executed containing this information, and so that has been going on since then. We didn't hear too much about it, except that last spring we were sort of informally informed that construction would not happen in June of 2023. While that was a little disappointing, we sort of had been a little bit prepared for it. So the project was moving forward. And Lemma, please feel free to jump in and correct me or add as you should. The next thing that sort of happened for us is, as you recall, at our last meeting, so this is now May 2024, immediately prior to this meeting, we were all sort of handed a revised plan that is now showing the parking canopies, the first 2 lanes still there, but the third one has been flipped to that side parking of the student lot. So it's no longer overhanging the multipurpose field. So there's 1, 2, and then there's 1 here. And again, apologies, I should have brought visuals.
I have the slides.
Oh, good. Yeah, if you want to throw up these plans, that would be great.
At least it's the renderings, which is probably sufficient. Right?
Oh, yeah. Even better. So. Oh, boy.
This is what we get.
What?
Sorry about that.
Oh, my God. Maybe, ask me later. There we go.
Sorry, Steve. I'm sorry, Steve. Steve's like shuddering.
Okay. So this is the first plan that we saw in 2022, and you'll see the canopies are just one lined up right after the other, with that last one overhanging the multipurpose field. Now, and I don't think this is the presentation from then, right? So now if you take that last one that overhangs the multipurpose field and kind of flip it to the cars that are along the right, the parking spots along the right, that's what the revised plan looks like. So we were handed this about 5 minutes before a meeting and sort of said, we need a new plan because there's an easement that runs through that last row with Algonquin Gas. They're claiming air rights, so we can't build there, so we're going to flip it over here. And so that was the purpose of the subcommittee meeting, was to look at that plan and discuss it. So during that meeting, it was confirmed that, the only thing that the school committee had really gotten was a plan. We didn't have a memo from Amoresco, and Amoresco at that point had not approached the school committee about coming before us to present. We also heard at that meeting that they were going to the planning board that night, the same night, that Tuesday, to request a modification to the site plan to show this change, because it was considered a change. They wanted the planning board to deem that to be a minor modification, and they further wanted the planning board to then approve the revised plan. And we heard that if they wanted to start this project, if they wanted to do it for summer of 2024, they needed to buy steel the next day. So if the planning board meeting was on May 14, they had to buy steel on May 15th. Otherwise, they would not get, the steel had such a long lead time, they were not going to get it in time, and they could not accomplish it during the summer. And of course, the only time they can do this project is during the summer, because we cannot do this when school is in session. So needless to say, we were really disappointed by pretty much all of this news, right? We were disappointed that it wasn't going forward this summer. We were disappointed that we had been given no information, no context. We were disappointed that it seemed to us that this project never had any intention of going forward this summer, because if it had, and they had to buy steel on the 15th, and then getting their first approval on the 14th was not going to get them anywhere, right? They needed the last approval on the 14th, not the first. So this was all very sort of disappointing to me. I think, Dory, you were equally disappointed. I know Lemma, who has been killing herself for this project. So at the meeting, we sort of said, look, we're clearly not going to be able to do the project this summer, right? They can't buy steel tomorrow because they don't have the approvals. We don't know if you'll get the planning board approval, but even if they do, they don't have the school committee approval to change the PPA, so there's no way this is going forward. So we want to take the time to figure out what's really happening, right? And at that point, we were going to recommend to this group that we would not, at this time, approve the plan, because we just didn't have enough information. We didn't have any context from Amoresco. We didn't have a presentation from them. We didn't have a memo. We just had a plan. So the planning board met that night. Unfortunately, neither Dory or I could go, but Joanna went and sort of conveyed to the planning board, you know, the school committee has concerns with the lack of information. They are going to not the school committee, the subcommittee has concerns, and they're going to make the recommendation to the full school committee that at this time we just take more time to figure out what's going on. The planning board had a lot of discussion on this. There was some confusion, and I think at the end of the day they ended up approving, confirming it was a minor modification, and then approving the plan. But in addition to that, they made their approval conditioned on trees. And what I mean by that is there was a note, I think there was a note in their packet that 9 trees had been removed from the high school parking lot. And so they asked, you know, what happened to those trees? And it turns out, as Nora explained, that over the course of the 20 years since the school was first designed and then built and then operated for 20 years, the population increased, the need for parking increased, and due to sort of, you know, citizen complaints from the maze, fair enough, the school district had removed islands to create more parking spaces, and consequently, over the course of these 20 years, had removed 9 trees. This is wholly separate and apart from the solar project, right? It has nothing to do with the solar project, but because the issue came up in the same context as the solar project, the approval of the planning board was conditioned on the school planting 9 trees, replacement trees. So that's where we are. We still, as far as I know, haven't been approached by Amoresco. It's clearly not going forward for the summer. I know the town is working with Tom to get some answers from Amoresco about, you know, what's happened. To be frank, I am disappointed in Amoresco because the gas line issue, which triggered this whole revision of the plan, was something that we've known since September of 2022. I'm not sure what happened. I think there may have been personnel shifts within Amoresco, project managers coming off and on. But I want to make clear, crystal clear, that the school committee fully supports this project, and that this recommendation to not move forward has nothing to do with the fact that, you know, that we don't want solar out there. That is as far from the truth as we can get. We absolutely want this project. We are disappointed we don't already have this project, but we want to make sure it's done right. And at this point, I don't know. So that's the solar project. The issue of the trees, I think we need to address, because clearly that will come at a cost. If we're supposed to, I think, respond back to the planning board by August with a tree plan. So I think we need to think about this, because 9 trees, especially if we're talking mature trees, are what, $30,000–$40,000? And I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable spending that much money on replacement trees at this time, given all of our other needs. There may be some town funds we could tap into, I think, Lemma mentioned, maybe some grants, and I would be willing to explore those. But at this point, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really comfortable spending $30,000 to $40,000 on replacement trees. I love trees, but we have a lot of... I feel like I had to say that. I love trees.
We love trees, we love solar.
We love trees and we love solar. We just need it to work.
Yeah.
So that's what I have.
Thank you, Maya.
Yes, and so we actually have not had a chance to
We
talk
have
in a
not.
couple of weeks. We've been trying to meet up and talk, but Maya and I are absolutely aligned on this. I also did go back and I reviewed the September 22 meeting, because I felt like I needed to look at the slides and so forth. And I will say a couple things I noted during that was, one, at that time, the lead time for steel was 6 months. So I'm a little confused about why we were trying to order steel for May 15th when this project was supposed to start in June. I can understand probably the lead time for steel has changed a little bit, right, if the market has loosened up, but is it down to 1 month from 6 months? I don't know. It feels like maybe that probably isn't the case. So I think that leads me to believe that your sort of hypothesis that this was not really going to go forward this year anyway is probably correct. The other thing I will say is that I noted during that meeting there was a lot of proactive discussion around efforts to try to make this happen, not this summer, but last summer in 2023. And it's very disappointing to me that so much chaos has occurred completely without kind of us knowing, and then it's just sort of dropped on our doorstep, and it's really disappointing. And you know, during our open meeting, we heard extensively from Lemma. I know that you've put in more than your fair share of hours to try to not only navigate this, but I think also
Project manage
and fix things, not only for this project, but also at the senior center. Because I think part of that encroaches on our property as well.
Yeah, so that's not going forward right now either.
Right. So, which is another whole other ball of confusion and chaos. So, I agree with you. This is not about an inability to support solar. It's an inability to support a vendor who has not been, in my view, transparent with us, and has not made good faith efforts to try to communicate and bring clarity and move things forward in a timely fashion.
Yep. Very well said.
Any other comments?
Anything, Joanna?
The only thing I wanted to say about the tree planting plan is, if it doesn't make sense, whatever our role is eventually or not about taking care of these trees, I don't think, while this plan is still in flux, it makes sense to plant trees, because we may be planting trees in places where they won't remain depending on where this lands. Unless
Agreed.
they're
And
completely separate and
agreed.
away from
Yeah.
anything around where they once were, which is around the parking lot.
Right.
So I have my point additionally, I don't think the planning board has jurisdiction, quite frankly, over our tree planting, despite what they may think. If they want to have jurisdiction, they should run for school committee. I'm being quite honest here. I've never seen a board try to tell another board what to do. They have no jurisdiction over our tree planting. We add and get rid of trees all the time. We don't go to the planning board every time that happens. And that's so I've never even seen a condition like that. So I would suggest maybe you talk to Chair Rawlings and communicate that clearly.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
My comment, in just looking at this plan, I'm surprised that it was classified as a minor modification because they're essentially moving 1/3 of the panels over. And just thinking about the use of that parking lot by our students and on the weekends with people from all different towns and even young kids running around, I question whether it's a absolutely like safe plan. And I think from my perspective on school committee, as much as I love the solar initiative, student safety has to come first. So I would want to take more time to analyze whether that is really a safe plan.
Yeah, and in the planning board meeting, you know, Amoresco confirmed that it would require both planning board approval and school committee approval. So they know about the two approvals, which is why I'm a little surprised that we haven't heard anything from them.
I mean, I can clarify one part of this, which is that I think it's a question of timeline. That's the reality of like how it happened, and like it speaks to some of the things, Dora, you were commenting on, like some questions you've raised, but they, as far as I know, realized the implications of this easement on the design in like the last days of April.
Right.
And then they were in conversations with the Algonquin Pipeline Company and the parent, it's like Enbridge, in the first week of May. And so if you think, you know, around May 5th or just 2-3 days before that school committee meeting, they got the response from Enbridge that they would not be able to erect that last row in the position where it was originally designed. That's when they approached me. It was like the day before the school committee meeting or the morning of, and that's when I knew that, okay, we need to provide an update. They made an alternate design, and they shared that with me. So they were scrambling in these weeks once they realized that error. The error was realized right before, you know, the school committee meeting and very close to the time when they needed to order steel. So it does say that they were like working down to the wire, if that was really the timeline to order steel. Like, this is a very tightly planned project with no leeway for any errors, and there was an error. And that's what I think occurred here.
I think you're,
so it's challenging.
Right. I also think you're being generous because, first of all, that gas line, they knew about in pre-investigative work. So,
They did.
And that occurred 2 years ago?
They knew about it, and somehow they, and it's hard to explain this, and they would have to comment, but they did not connect the dots. So the gas line was indicated on drawings that they had, but someone didn't do the diligence of contacting Enbridge and understanding whether there was a restriction on erecting over it.
Which is fair enough, right?
Yeah, they
People
sat
make
on that
mistakes.
for a
I completely understand that. Then the message to us should have been, we made a mistake. We know we need 2 approvals. We're not going to get them before the summer. We can't do the project this summer. We're going to come to your next meeting. We're going to explain what happened, and we're going to come up with a mitigation plan, right? We're going to figure out how to mitigate this issue and give you a new schedule and make you all comfortable that we know what we're doing. And they didn't do that. They went to the planning board, and in the planning board meeting explained that the reason for the revised design was because the town directed them to revise the design, and then the revised design had a gas easement, and the gas easement required them to change the which is all true, right? But very misleading the way it was presented to the planning board. It made it seem like it was very sort of, you know, BAU, matter of fact, this is what happened as we went along, and here we are today. They also didn't mention the fact that they needed a second approval. They needed our approval, and there's no way, they hadn't even approached us. So I just felt like that meeting, the presentation at that meeting was very one-sided. It did not provide all the facts. And honestly, I was not happy at, you know, watching that back. I really was not. And if this is the vendor that's supposed to be coming to us and working cooperatively and transparently with us, this has been anything but. So, you know, you're right in that they were scrambling at the end, but how they handled that mistake is really what I'm objecting to.
Especially knowing, by the way, and I don't want to be mysterious here, but also knowing the context of the other piece with the senior center that has also had some stumbling blocks and is not able to move forward with the same vendor. it feels like there's some, I don't know, something going on there that feels a little off and gives me pause, in addition to all the other points that everybody has made. You know, I'm going through a home renovation right now, right? And so we spent a lot of time picking out vendors for our house. And you know, you want to trust and have open communication with folks. This is a much bigger project than my tiny little Cape expansion, right? And so I'm not feeling that at this moment.
Yeah.
And it really, again, truly has nothing to do with trees or solar. Yeah. And I'm sorry that you've been caught in the firestorm of this. Yeah. Thank you for dealing with it.
Thank you
Thank
for all
you.
of the
Yeah.
work.
No, I mean, I understand. I think it's important to take a pause.
Yeah.
So that makes sense as the approach right now, and to make sure that we're taking the right next steps. And so, you know, it sounds like we have some research to do to determine what those next steps should be.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other updates, liaison reports? No. All right, so let's move along to Tim's evaluation. Tony, you'll be taking the floor for that.
I'll take the floor for that. Well, great. So this is the time of the year when we do the superintendent's evaluation. I think last year, because Emily was leaving and COVID kind of made things weird. So I don't think we've done this process for a few years this way. But just as context, for some of you new, I got a lot of feedback, talked to 4 folks in the central office, 3 principals, school committee members, to try to get a comprehensive perspective here. There is a rubric that I don't know if it's DESE, I think it's DESE puts out for superintendents, so I tried to follow that generally in the categories. So I'm not going to go through all the details, but I thought I'd give a little bit summary and then get any additional comments for the committee. I mean, overall, I think, as a start, I think overall the feedback was really positive, that you hit the ground running, brought your experience to bear here, and really, overall, it was a great year. So I think that's the headline. I'm looking forward to year 2 and beyond. So I'll just give a few comments on the specific areas. There's 4 areas in the rubric: instructional leadership, management operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. So I'll just give a few highlights of each. I think on instructional leadership, the themes we heard a lot about was a lot about your entry plan. They thought it was very thoughtful. You got a lot of input, and then the recommendations, both strengths and opportunities, really reflected on what, I think people relied on what the needs of the district were. So that was one strength for sure. I think there was a lot of people that acknowledged from a curriculum perspective that seeing the opportunity to, with the way it worked out in kind of the Pine Hill consolidation, to kind of tackle a long-standing goal around the specials. They acknowledged that, kind of the creative way to look at the curriculum, so that was a strength. And then the other piece that came up just was generally your ability to kind of work in data and work with tools, get into Excel and all that, and just kind of do that was actually a real strength. And even the specials was something that people highlighted. That was a real big strength of yours. So great on that. I think, and so mostly what I'm going to talk about, kind of looking forward opportunities, I think a lot of it is around how you think about your time going forward. Year 1 was a lot about community, a lot about learning what's going on. I think year 2 was obviously going to be more about strategy and moving forward. So I think the one opportunity as they think about your time moving forward was just thinking about trying to get additional time in the classrooms. I know you spent some time in the classrooms, but trying to get additional time in the classrooms, particularly at the middle and high school level. So that would be, we'd encourage you to do that. Second category is management operations. So here as a strength, overarching strength that I heard from everybody was your relationships both with other superintendents, relationships with government officials, and just in general, I would say it's probably the best in the Commonwealth. So I think that was a strength, and people really wanted to actually learn more about it. And I think people cited that as a real strength and able to kind of connect and get answers very quickly when there were issues. I think strategically, I think initiating the master plan, both the strategic plan as well as the facilities, I think that will do the district well. And then, you did a lot of HR this year. Hopefully with these hires, maybe not as much next year. But I think the process you ran was very inclusive. The process was diligent. You took your time. So that was cited as a strength as well. And then I think the only other, again, on this theory of time, I think is people think you've only got so much time. The feedback here is just continue to leverage your great, amazing team, both the new people and your existing team, to hopefully continue to free up your time to do other high priority issues. Third category was family and community engagement. I'd start here saying I think some people felt you might have a twin because you were everywhere. So definitely a lot of credit. I don't know, everywhere, every concert, every athletic event, every 10-year plan, you were everywhere. So I think that was a great, particularly in your first year, to really get out there and meet folks. You also, I think, spent a lot of time with the municipal team, starting to build relationships there, so that was cited as a strength. And I think, addressing, you were also had a very open door policy. You would meet with, I think, anyone, that wanted to meet with you on any topic. So I think community really appreciated that willingness to meet with people. And then the final thing I'll just mention, that more of a kind of a skill that came up almost a lot of interviews, was your active listening. So that was really cited as a strength, how good a listener you were in active listening. So just a great skill to continue on your community engagement. And then I think the area of just focus for next year, this isn't really so much about, I think for you, Superintendent, it was emerged in your entry plan, was around communication. And that's not just I think so much youth issue, but I think it's around how the district thinks about communication. So I think just thinking about how we can continue to make ground on better communication. It's been talked about my 8 years on the committee, so, but I think it emerged as something to continue to think about. And finally, professional culture. I think a few of the key things here was a lot around, you had a lot of trust in the team. I think your natural style is to delegate and trust the team, so I think people felt supported and trusted. You have very strong core values that I think were great, particularly around equity and just making sure that we are, trying to educate and take care of all the children. So that was cited. And I think just respect for boundaries. I mean, we all have very busy lives, but I think you have a good respect for the team's boundaries. Everyone's working really hard, and respecting that was definitely cited. And then as far as just going forward, I think this isn't so much about professional culture. I think just continuing to understand your core values, but also our core values in Westwood around excellence. I don't think, at least in my view, excellence doesn't need to be opposed to kind of caring for all students, and just thinking about how do we kind of both achieve both goals. So overall, a great year. We look forward to continuing to work with you, and thank you, and look forward to year 2.
So thank you, Tony, and thank you to all the members of the committee. I really appreciate the thoroughness and thoughtfulness with which you went through the process. I will say that nothing that I do is possible without the amazing people that I work with, that are here, that are out there, that are in the trenches working with kids every day. So any positive feedback in my direction is really a credit to all of them. So, but I particularly want to thank the 5 of you as a committee for giving me conditions for success. I talked about when I came here, I was really looking forward to coming to a community where it was more aligned with my own personal values. I appreciate you calling out the core values in the evaluation, because I finding a home here, kind of going on a limb after having been one place for so long, this feels like a home now, and I'm really grateful and appreciative to everybody in the community for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Can we just maybe say it probably feels like a home? I'm not sure you've actually slept at home. So that's probably
There's a
why it
reason it feels like home.
That may be true. Yeah, that may be true.
Thank you, Tony, for taking
Sure,
the time.
sure, of course.
And Tim, do you want to take us through the changes to the transportation policy, the recommendations?
Sure, absolutely. So at our last meeting in May, we had presented a few of the outstanding policies that had been carried over from last year. I just want to mention, because they are on the agenda to potentially be voted later, the other policies that are in there: student transportation in private vehicles, fuel efficient vehicle, and private tutoring for pay, and the digital resource policies. There's no change from the last meeting, so I'd recommend that the committee, if you're willing to entertain waiving the third reading, you would do that. Regarding the transportation policy, we heard the feedback that came from the last meeting, and there were some substantive changes that we added. You can see those in red in the memo. The first part, just at the bottom of the second page of the memo, because we talk about let me step back for a second. I think the concerns were really about the process of eligibility for transportation in order to really establish a formalized appeal process for that. In order to establish a formalized appeal process, I think we need to clarify what our process was for establishing eligibility in the first place. So we just added a caveat there at the end of page 2 that just said that we have zones, they're in a parcel map, but they will be reviewed. They may be subject to a change on an annual basis, but that we would let people know by July 15th about any changes to the zones. That being said, the appeal process, which I will admit that I have freely stolen from another district, who stole it from another district before that, But it's good to not have to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. And I do appreciate one nuanced change that was made here. So it basically lays out that if a parent or guardian wishes to challenge transportation eligibility, the first step is to go to the district administrator in charge, which is Lemma, who reviews the process and determines whether or not eligibility is met or not, and it would be either upheld or denied. Should that initial request be denied, and I think this is the challenge that I know you as committee members have heard about, we would establish a formal appeal process through a transportation appeal board. That transportation appeal board would have 3 members. Since my job is to make sure the process is adhered to, and since Lemma's job is to make the initial determination, the person in central office who would do that, and Allison was very happy to support this because she will not be the person doing it, would be the assistant superintendent or designee. So that would be one person who's just making sure from like an operational perspective in the district office. The second person would be a designee from the Westwood Police Department. I talked with Chief Silva about this. This would generally be the town safety officer. But in case that person's not available, that's why it says or designee. And the third person would be a non-employee community member. That non-employee community member would essentially represent sort of the layperson for members of the community. The change that was made would be that community member would be appointed by the chair of the school committee, and up to 2 additional alternates could be designated to fill that slot. So that process would go through, appeals would be submitted, eligibility, or the appeal would have to have specific criteria, either saying that we had miscalculated distance, there was a potential safety hazard, or there were roadways formally identified as an area of concern. For example, there's active construction going on, there's been a high level of accidents in it, something like that, right? Those would be formal areas. If that appeal is submitted, that Transportation Appeal Board would meet. They would basically then issue a decision within 15 business days of the hearing. If they needed to collect a little additional information, there's a provision for time there. But then that determination would be made and would be submitted to the applicant. And the process would basically say that if an appeal was either upheld or denied, it would not be able to be revisited unless there was a substantive change. So a family would not be able to submit necessarily the same appeal each time. We did have some conversation about whether or not that would establish an appeal for the neighborhood. We ultimately decided not to do that because if I live at one place and you live 2 doors down from me, but we don't get along, I don't want your process to dictate whether or not my child has eligibility, so we wanted to maintain the ability to have independent appeals. But certainly if there was a neighborhood that wanted to come, we would hear that collectively, as opposed to having a separate process for each family. So hopefully this gets at the concerns that were raised at the committee at the last meeting, but I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions, and I thank Lemma for her thought process on this as well. So,
Thank you for those changes.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, look good.
Okay.
How would you envision the community member appointment? Would we just solicit
Yeah, I mean,
to see who's interested?
I think that's probably the best way to do it, right? And I think it would be important to vet, and
Right.
I would say either select members from different parts of town. I think one of the things that we were, I had this policy in my former district. One of the things that we tried to make sure that we did is that if it was let's say an appeal at Downey, then we would not have a Downey parent sitting on that appeal, just so there was sort of a degree of separation in that decision.
Okay.
And who sort of oversees the, the continuity of this type of decision-making over time? If the community member changes and, the school safety officer changes, who, are there records, or, how do we ensure that it doesn't become unfair?
Yeah, so we would maintain records of the process, right? And if we realized over time that this process wasn't working, then I would certainly come back to the committee and make a recommendation to change the policy going forward. I think that the continuity comes from the 2 members that are both the assistant superintendent and the member of the police department, where even if there is a changeover in those positions, positionally, we have that institutional history there.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to action items. So I wonder if we have a motion to approve the April 23rd meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to approve the May 9th meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we need to make a motion to waive the third reading. So do we have a motion for that, to waive the third reading of the policy revisions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And do we have a motion to approve the policy revisions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just on the next item, thank you. Due to an issue that I'll take responsibility for, there was a technical issue with the MOU, with the custodial union. We have come to an agreement, but they were not able to ratify because of essentially the format of the MOU. So it's not appropriate for the school committee to vote before the union does. So we would take this up at our July retreat meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so we're formally table. I would request the committee formally tables this until the July meeting. So
Okay.
Okay. We don't need a motion for that.
no.
Okay. And lastly, can I have a motion to vote to appoint Reid Jones to the school building committee effective July 1st?
When does that thing go away?
I
Question.
know, I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, it really, from experience, it doesn't officially go away until after the audit is completed, which is about 2 years after the project is actually completely done. 2 to 3 years after the
Told us
project is
this?
done. Now, that being said, I might suggest that the SBC doesn't have to jointly meet with the PBC once it's done.
Okay.
but,
Yeah, I did raise this at the last meeting, and I think through the completion of the project, so through August, and then after that, I think we will let the PBC.
Okay.
PBC is going to be off the hook. I don't know about me, but the PBC is off the hook. I mean, the SBC.
Okay, thanks.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And if I can just mention to the committee, we actually have another member that needs to be appointed to the SBC that we had forgotten to put on this agenda. I don't know Fergal's last name,
I'm forgetting.
so my apologies to
Fergal.
him.
We apologize to Fergal for two things, forgetting his last name and for not including him. So we'll do that in July.
Okay.
Who is
Great.
Fertile?
He's a new appointee to the PBC.
Oh, okay.
So he'll be he's a voting member of the PBC, so we're
Okay.
also putting him on the SBC.
Great. And is there any new business? Anybody would like to share?
Yeah, so see, now you're starting to pack stuff up. So I mentioned I was holding stuff till the end. So I began the superintendent's report by welcoming. I do want to acknowledge, first of all of our staff members that are retiring across the district this year. Thank you for your collective years of service to the Westwood Public Schools. But there are members of certainly my administrative team or our administrative team that I've gotten to know really well this year that I know we're going to miss all of them because they're heading off to other adventures. So to Donna Olson, who is retiring as the assistant principal at Pine Hill, congratulations to Donna. To Josh Balmer, who I know is heading out west to Colorado. So Josh, thank you for your time here. Thank you for shepherding the transition of Pine Hill this year. I'm incredibly grateful for your work with kids and with families and what you've done for us here in Westwood. So thank you so much. Lisa Friedman, has announced she will be with us until the end of August. But since we don't have another public school committee meeting, you can all yell at Emily for Lisa is going. Lisa is going and joining tech. So I'm happy for her that she's moving into that new experience and new opportunity. And so I certainly wish her well and thank her for all of her work with the preschool and with our families in her role as elementary student services department chair. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, definitely not leastly, Allison Borchers, who I can't thank you enough for your just your support, your thought partnering, your welcoming me into this community that you've spent the last 27 years in, and really helping me avoid the pitfalls along the way, at least as much as any of us possibly can. I promise to try to return the same to you as much as possible as you go on to Westboro. But you have left an indelible mark here in Westwood. I think it was on full display when we had your celebration last week. But just on a personal level, I will miss working with you every day. But I'm looking forward to seeing you at all the MASS events in the near future. So thank you so much.
I know.
So thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you. I want to say out loud here something I said at the lovely event, which is I feel very fortunate to have worked with this committee, and I know that not everybody is that fortunate to work with folks who are elected officials who give voluntarily of their time, a lot of their time, way more of their time than anybody ever knows or sees, because so much of this meeting and what goes on for this meeting happens outside of this meeting. You know, everyone is here for the right reasons. You are just sort of thoughtful, wonderful people who I think are doing good things for kids, so keep it up. Yeah, don't quit, please don't quit. The community needs folks like that. It's, and, you know, I've enjoyed the whole thing. It's been tremendous. I've kind of grown up here, you know. I started when I was a kid, really. I mean, I literally was at the middle school as a teacher, and people would stop me periodically and ask me if I had a class to go to, you know, that kind of thing. And so it's been wild. And, you know, after swearing to Mayo that I would never take the job of superintendent. I mean, I feel like I'm sad to be leaving. I feel very kind of prepared to try something new and kind of like a little bird getting shoved out of the nest to go and see a new adventure. I will certainly keep in touch. I feel like this is a tremendous community. I look forward to sort of, you know, figuring out how they do things over there and if there are things that can be helpful in sharing resources and sharing ideas, because I think that's something that is part of the job. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You will be missed very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, does anybody have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.